Hi, everyone. As Graham said, I'm head of responsible investment at Royal London Asset Management. If you don't know us, we are the asset management arm of Royal London Group, which is the largest UK mutually owned pensions and life business. We have about 156 billion pounds sterling in assets under management across a variety of different asset classes. So my comments today are really focused on what it looks like, I guess, at the coalface from an asset manager perspective. I think my comments post-COP is really two things. Commitment is relatively easy. Action is very hard. And I think you heard that coming out in some of Hakima's comments earlier. And so we've committed now. Much of the finance sector has now committed to this. And now it's the hard yards. That now is when the hard work begins, and it's not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be a linear path, and we don't really necessarily know what's next, but it's about putting some plans in place. So what are we doing at Royal London? I think what we're trying to do at the moment is work really hard behind the scenes and take some quite authentic action. In the last 6 months, we have moved almost all of our passive equity funds away from market weight passive index tracking funds into ESG and carbon tilted funds. So we are reducing the sort of carbon impact or the carbon intensity of our passive equity book between 10 and 30%. And that's quite a big change for us. That's a signal to the market that we don't believe that market weight passive is the future. We don't believe that market weight passive tracking properly values ESG factors or really takes into consideration climate risk. So this was a fairly large step for us as a business. It means that all of our pension savers and pension clients now in their building blocks of their pension scheme have moved their default to lower carbon funds. So that's some of the kind of clear action that we're trying to take as an asset manager. What else have we been doing? We've been having lots of conversations with our clients. So if anything that COP26 did is I've had more conversations with clients about net zero and climate in the last 3 months than I have in the last 8 years I've been at Royal London. So that's a really, really positive thing. I've had more conversations with fund managers in the last 3 months, 6 months than I have in 8 years about climate, carbon metrics, carbon intensity, warming potential, all of these really important things that we need to start thinking about as a business. So that's a really positive thing. Where are we now? We're really having conversations with our clients. So many of our clients are asking the question and grappling with the question about how do I create a net zero portfolio? And that's having a lot of really interesting discussions. So for example, a lot of education with some of our less sophisticated clients about it's unlikely to be a linear reduction path. And it's going to come in lumps and bumps probably. And we don't always know what it's going to look like. And we don't necessarily have all the metrics today that we might have tomorrow. So it's complex. So we're having those conversations with our clients. We're working really hard on the ground with investment teams, really getting them the information and the data that they need to make good decisions on the ground. And it can be really small things, big things, but small things. So, 3-4 years ago, we did a big project looking at UK utilities. And at the time, UK utilities, we had gas distribution utilities and we had electric distribution utilities. And these were priced very similar. They're basically the same in the market. The fund manager said, well, the gas and the electric one, they look kind of the same. They're regulated the same. So we did a bit of work looking at the climate kind of future of those assets. And when we're lending to these assets from a fixed income perspective, we're lending to the actual physical infrastructure, the gas pipelines and the electrical distribution lines. And 3 years ago, we concluded that we really felt, even though that these bonds were trading the same, actually, there was really no downside for us to switch from gas to electric from a financial perspective, but it gave us a lot of more protection from a climate perspective. And so we actually took that action a couple of years ago to move much of our clients' assets out of gas utility distribution to electric utility distribution. It's a really small act, and it impacted, some of our credit portfolios, but actually now the spreads have widened between those two bond types. And that was really the right call. So it's kind of all the on the ground work around that we can help as an asset manager, really working with the investment teams. And then the final thing I guess we're really working on is getting the data right. I could go on and on about data. The data will never be perfect. It will never be right. There's a lot of really rubbish data out there, and we're working behind the scenes to get the data as close to the assets as possible. So really trying to understand what the data is trying to tell us, being healthily skeptical of the data as well, because there's some data points that are useful, but perhaps not perfectly accurate. And building those tools and systems to allow our fund managers to interpret that data. So a lot of what we've been doing has been very bottom up from the ground. I think now what we're working on is a high level plan. So the feedback we've got from our parent company and from many of our clients is, that's great, you're doing lots of stuff on the ground, but actually we need to see your plan. And so that's something we're working on. And that's, frankly, to be honest, not an easy thing to do, because there's lots of levers that we can pull at any given time to have to try to have an impact. And one of the biggest challenges that we have as an asset manager, and kind of Hakima's comments spoke to this a bit, was that we are, in many cases, 1 or 2 steps removed from the real economy. We are financiers of businesses. We are not the businesses themselves. We provide financing and we can take financing away, but that doesn't always have an impact on the real economy. So what we're trying to do within our business is really focus on what actions can we take that's going to have an impact on the real economy. So if you imagine we all live in this bubble, I'm sure I'm preaching to converted, we all live in a bubble. And if I sell my carbon molecule from my fund to a different investor, that molecule still exists in the bubble. We have done nothing to impact climate change. So for us, some of the hard discussions we have to have with clients is around things like exclusions. There may be a role for excluding certain companies from our portfolio, and we will absolutely consider that. But just because we've excluded a company or we've sold an asset to a private investor or a state-owned actor does not mean that that asset's being closed down. It does not mean that that coal-fired power plant is not going to emit. So the hard work is yet to come. Our real role as asset managers is to think about how we can allocate capital and work with our clients. And I think just to conclude with Hakima's comments is a similar comment, which is a bit of a word of caution. I think it was really nice that Glasgow really highlighted the role of the finance sector. We absolutely have a vital role to play, but I do worry that we could become a distraction for policymakers. We could easily become a distraction to say finance will fix it. And that is really, really dangerous from my perspective. Absolutely, finance has a role, but we 100% need government policy, the companies that we invest in, and the real economy to take action to reduce the impacts of climate change. And with that, Chair, I'll hand back to you.